Good morning, everyone. There may still be a little bit of technical issues that we are working with, but please don't be discouraged. we're trying not to be discouraged, but hopefully it'll be moving smoothly as we get used to things, and hopefully the whole registration system and people joining will be smoother. This morning, the interface between Zoom and YouTube Live didn't work. So it's on Facebook Live, and we'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel. But there are a number of folks who watch us later in the week. So I want to make sure that functions. So we are looking at how we're moving forward in the next few years. And I'm giving you a picture of what that will look like. And I want to go to PowerPoint because I think it just really helps to look at it visually. So when we started out during COVID, we started out with a classic Mahayana view and text, the Bodhisattva's way of life, and then we went on to the Lojong mind training systems. So that is grounded in Theravada and points to Vajrayana. So what I want to be clear about is that the three vehicles, as we express them in Buddhism, or the three ways of understanding and practice, are really interdependent. Sometimes the example is given of a ladder, so that you have to start on the bottom rung and move to the next rung and move to the next rung. But that gives the impression of higher and lower, when really what we're talking about is the interdependence of the three systems creating a complete view. So I gave the example last week of, well, let's look at the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are expressed and studied in the three different vehicles from different perspectives with expanded understanding, but we're still looking at the Four Noble Truths. And the complete understanding, which are the 4 moments before enlightenment, the 4 last moments of conceptual thought, you might say, can't be understood independently of the three vehicles. It has to be understood fully or interdependently with the three vehicles: view and explanation and practice. So one way of thinking about it is climbing a mountain. So from the perspective of looking at the mountain, we have one understanding of the mountain. We look at it and we can see it's something that's very tall and something that meets the sky, and something that's you might have all kinds of perspectives looking at the mountain. Then the process of climbing the mountain is equivalent to the path. So there's a sense of all the different things you learn about the mountain by climbing the mountain. If a helicopter just dropped us on top of the mountain, we wouldn't really understand the mountain. It's the process of climbing the mountain that allows us to understand the mountain. And then standing on top of the mountain, we have a totally different view than standing looking up at the mountain. But standing on top of the mountain, and then you go back down, your view incorporates looking at the mountain, climbing the mountain, and the view that you had while you were on top. So all of these different things that we have been studying are still topics for study and practice, but we're going into a more detailed, subtle, and complex understanding of what they mean. So if we were to talk about the view and practice of the Theravada, essentially the study reference would be the Pali Sutras. And, the key teaching is the Four Noble Truths. And one of the key practices is what's called the Four Brahma Viharas. The Four Brahma Viharas are the same thing as the Four Immeasurables. They're just expressed slightly differently, and the practice is very straightforward and elemental. And the meditation practice we call shamatha vipassana, but again, it's something that's very straightforward and elemental. So then when we move to the Mahayana, how we understand the Four Noble Truths and how we understand the Four Immeasurables is expanded. And how it's expanded has to do with applying an investigation of wisdom to that understanding. So if we were to think of who we are right now, and we could easily say our experience of life in its complexity, in our families, in our different situations, and we thought of the first noble truth of suffering. We could easily say, in our own situation, we experience suffering, the body aging, family members dying. There are just so many different ways. And if we look around the world, there is just great suffering around the world. So we can see all human beings are experiencing suffering. So we have the introduction of the Four Brahma Viharas with the wish of beings to be free from suffering, and we have our own wish to be free from suffering. But in the Mahayana, we expand our intention of our practice removing suffering from our own mental state to all sentient beings being lifted out of suffering. And there's still the daily life of, at this minute, you're going to the doctor, there's this particular suffering you're working with, or favorite loved one has died, there's a particular suffering, and our immediate response is get me out of suffering. So the Mahayana path is traversing the get me out of suffering to may I and all sentient beings truly be lifted out of suffering, and may I have the same sincere intention for all sentient beings that I have for myself getting out of suffering. And the method is a deeper understanding of the emptiness nature of phenomena and the emptiness nature of how we experience our minds, our inner phenomena. And the study that helps us traverse that path. For our purposes, will be the Heart Sutra. And the guiding text will be one of the kinds of texts that we call Lam Rim. So over the centuries, different teachers have looked at the sutras. And the sutras are very diverse because the sutras are the memorized teachings of the Buddha. Every time he went into a village, people would ask different questions, and then he would respond. So if we look at 1 3-inch thick text, there might be 100 different perspectives on how to work with anger, or 100 different perspectives on how to work with attachment. So what teachers did over time is they put together texts called Lam Rim text, where they organized all of the teachings on anger have to do with these key points. All of the teachings on attachment have to do with these key points. So they organized the sutra teachings. They added the commentaries of, in 1,000 years, in each era, there were several people who achieved enlightenment. So they would add in their lineage the instructions coming from these great masters. And then they would organize things in a way that were comprehensible in terms of how to traverse the path. So in the Mahayana, we talk about things like the 6 perfections. And we're still working with shamatha and vipassana, but the vipassana now relates to insight directed towards deeper levels of understanding this emptiness of phenomena and emptiness of, outer and inner phenomena. So it's expanded and organized, let's say. So then the third vehicle, Vajrayana, one way of explaining this is in the earlier 2 vehicles, the Sutrayana or the Theravada and the Mahayana, we're looking at the path, and in the Vajrayana, we're focusing on fruition, which is absolute reality. So the earlier 2 are looking at relative reality, how we're directly experiencing phenomena, how we're directly experiencing our inner minds, how we're directly looking at how we're defining our experience and how we're defining identity, and how all of those things relate to suffering and traversing the path out of suffering. In Vajrayana, we're looking at the fruition, so we're looking at the absolute, the changeless nature. And the 4 noble truths and 4 immeasurables are practiced from that view, that perspective. Shamatha Vipassana is practiced from that view, that perspective. And so then you hear terms like Mahamudra and Dzogchen. So we talk about sadhana practice, and sadhana practice uses shamatha and vipassana in its different phases of creation and completion. It's still the same topics, but the view and guiding texts and meditation practice are working with our experience from a different perspective and a different view, from the perspective and view of the Absolute. But without a clear understanding of how our direct experience gradually can shift into the Absolute, what is the relationship between the two, what is the inseparability of the two, then the practice of Vajrayana is only intellectual. It's not a direct experience, because your direct experience seems to be contradicting, because the direct experience is in the relative. Here in Vajrayana, we're traversing until the Absolute and the relative are inseparable. But you can't have one without the other, or can't understand one without the other. So going back to, if we think of the view being different from looking up at the mountain and being on the mountaintop, but our experience of the mountain is going up the mountain and back down the mountain, and our systemic full experience being all three: the view of the bottom, the view of the top, and what traversing it has taught us. So as we go forward, we'll be looking at key understandings, and we're looking at, from the perspective of the four dharmas of Gampopa, grant your blessings, may my mind be one with the Dharma. So mind being one with the Dharma is the how. There's a key understanding. The key understanding has lots of different levels. How does our mind become one with the Dharma? Through study and practice. So it's an expanding understanding. And the early view, the Theravada, pervades the expanded view and experience of the Vajrayana. So what's interesting in our Sangha is that we're approaching it from the perspective of Tibetan Buddhism. And Tibetan Buddhism incorporates the Sutrayana and the Vajrayana. And in our particular Sangha, in the Drikung lineage, the meditation practice that unifies the three vehicles and the different views is the Shravasti meditation system that His Holiness has introduced. So he is one of the masters in this era, and he's looking at the understanding of different perspectives of Buddhism and how to see and understand their inseparability, as well as a structured way to traverse the understandings in our experience, so that we're moving from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain and to the top of the mountain in a way that we understand how everything fits together and how everything is dependent on each other. And then eventually we will incorporate Vajrayana practice as well. And so I put Tara as our last slide. Okay. So the invitation that I was talking about last week is addressing the fact that just like in the time of the Buddha, we come to any Dharma Sangha, any circle of practitioners with different needs, different experiences, different wishes of what we want to receive from any particular group. And quite a few people in our group have expressed a desire for deeper introduction to practice, or a more full introduction to practice than we're able to do just on Sundays or just on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that's why I'm creating a study group, practice group, that'll be one early evening a week. And I'm going to put information about that probably in our next newsletter. And of course, we'll announce it every Sunday. So on the Sundays, we're setting up what clearly will be a multi-year investigation, just like the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life was a multi-year investigation. I don't want to scare you with the multi-year aspect, but let's just say it will be our usual format of a Dharma talk, and the Dharma talk being built around a particular insight, and then that insight building as a whole, and within that whole, it will be first the Theravadan key concepts, then the Mahayana, then the Vajrayana. And so I expect it to be still both fun, interesting, and challenging as we look at small pieces on Sundays. And then for those folks who have the wish or desire to do additional readings on that particular area and to have a longer discussion, then we will have an additional time during the week for that. So you can continue just as you are and still get great benefit, and you can taste a little more, join a little more, if you'd like that. And I think it will be very helpful because it will allow everyone to reflect on what we've learned so far and understand where that enhances your practice and give you tools for evaluating your practice. And when I say evaluating your practice, it would be, first of all, is this contributing to the lessening of my own suffering and how I am either broadcasting harm in my family or broadcasting love and harmony in my family. So if a real practitioner, if you want to evaluate your practice, you'll ask your closest friends and family, am I becoming less of a jerk, essentially? So there should be an effect that your navigating of the world is having. And usually our friends and family are happily able to say, oh, this is really helping you keep going, or I think you need to take another look. So that's an easy way of evaluating. And then when we look at the different expanded views in the different vehicles, we can say, is my practice actually incorporating greater levels of wisdom or prajna? And is that then informing my own suffering and how I navigate the world, either like a bull in a china shop, or like a ballet dancer, noticing everyone else's place on the dance floor and moving gracefully among all the other dancers. So let's complement this morning by some meditation and then discussion. And the meditation practice this morning will be what we call calm abiding, or shamatha, and that is the first piece of the Sharvasti curriculum, which is directly from Buddha Shakyamuni's teaching on meditation. So in order to begin, we have to be able to settle our mind and focus our minds. And one of the easiest indicators of whether we're distracted or not distracted is to simply count our breaths. And as we count our breaths, if we can count from 1 to 10 without a conceptual thought, without a distraction entering, we're actually really quite accomplished. Mostly we'll notice very easily somewhere along the way we'll lose count of the numbers, or we'll see a conceptual thought. There was a extraordinary teacher, Ajahn Chah, and one of his famous quotes is, I always ask my students, how are they doing with counting their breaths? And if they tell me that they can count beyond 3, I know that either they're lying or they're not seeing subtle distraction. So this allows us first to see gross distraction and then subtle distraction. So without really any judgment, just with simple curiosity, breathing in, breathing out, each exhalation is 1, then the next exhalation is 2, just noticing distraction versus non-distraction, and allowing just a relaxation with counting our breaths from 1 to 10. So I'm going to stop the Facebook Live for discussion. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. Okay. And I'm going to stop